My parents forced me to drop out so my brother could study now. He works for me and pretends. He doesn't recognize the failure he mocked. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I've always been the one my family overlooked. Growing up, I learned early that in our house, love was conditional and I didn't meet the conditions. My parents used to brag about my younger brother Ethan like he was some kind of prodigy. He's going places, they'd say. He's the smart one. I'd be sitting right there, invisible, pretending it didn't sting. We weren't a rich family. Dad worked long shifts at a metal factory, and Mom picked up part-time cleaning jobs. We lived paycheck to paycheck, but somehow, there was always money for Ethan's tutoring, new clothes, and fancy school trips. When I asked for something as simple as new shoes for work, the answer was always, "You're older. You can manage." By the time I was 16, I was juggling school and a part-time job at a local grocery store just to keep the lights on. I'd come home late, reeking of detergent and sweat, only to hear my parents laughing with Ethan about his science projects. Sometimes I'd stand at the doorway watching them. The pride in their eyes, it was something I never got to see pointed at me. One night, while helping Dad fix a broken pipe under the sink, I asked quietly, "Do you ever think I could go to college too?" He didn't even look up. "You're more practical, son. Someone's got to keep things steady while your brother shoots high." That line stuck with me for years, like I'd been assigned my role without being asked. Still, I tried not to resent him. Ethan was my little brother, after all. I told myself that one day, maybe, my parents would notice all the sacrifices I made. But deep down, a quiet bitterness started to grow. One that would soon have nowhere left to hide, and that bitterness began to shape every decision I made afterward. The day the college letters arrived was supposed to be one of the happiest of my life. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, hands trembling as I opened the envelope. I'd been accepted full admission to a state university. For once, I thought maybe this was my turn to be proud. But before I could even say the words out loud, Ethan came running in, waving his own letter, screaming. I got into Westbridge. The look on my parents' faces said everything. They were beaming, crying, hugging him. When I finally managed to share my news, Mom just said, "That's great, honey," without looking away from Ethan's acceptance letter. Then Dad sighed, his tone serious. "We can't afford tuition for both of you." My heart sank as he continued. "Ethan's program is more competitive. Maybe you can take a year off, help around here until we figure things out." A year off. I knew what that meant. It was never just 1 year. It was a polite way of saying, give up your dream for your brother. I looked at Ethan, expecting maybe a word of guilt or gratitude, but he just grinned and said, "You'll be fine, man. You're the responsible one." That night, I sat in my room, staring at the acceptance letter under the lamplight. I could almost hear the laughter from the next room, Mom and Dad celebrating Ethan's future. Mine was fading before it even began. I wanted to scream to tell them it wasn't fair, but instead, I folded the letter neatly and tucked it away in a drawer. The next morning, I told my parents I'd start working full-time at the factory with Dad. Mom smiled and said, "That's my good boy." And just like that, my dream became another sacrifice in the long list of things I'd given up for. Family. But what I didn't know then was that this sacrifice wouldn't make them love me. Marit would make me disappear completely. Was supposed to be a year off, quietly turned into forever. I remember the first winter after Ethan left for college, how the house felt emptier, yet somehow heavier. My days started before dawn. I'd walk to the factory through biting cold, the air thick with the smell of steel and sweat, my boots leaving deep prints in the frost. By the time I came home, my body ached so bad, it felt like the bones inside me were rusting too. Every paycheck I earned went straight into the family account. When I hesitated once, when I wanted to keep a bit for myself, Mom's voice turned sharp. "Your brother's tuition is due next week. You don't want to ruin his future, do you?" So I'd nod and hand it over. I became the invisible provider, the ghost who paid for someone else's success. Meanwhile, Ethan's life looked like a movie. His social media was full of smiling pictures, college parties, new clothes, a trip to Spain with his friends. I remember one photo vividly, him posing in a leather jacket with the caption, "Hard work pays off." Hard work. The irony made my stomach twist. Still, I convinced myself it was worth it. That someday, when Ethan graduated and started earning, maybe he'd help me finally live my own dream. But that day never came. The longer it went on, the more my world shrank. My friends drifted away, my parents only called when bills were due, and my hope, my sense of worth started to fade. The only person who treated me like I mattered was Jake, an older coworker at the factory. During lunch breaks, he'd talk about online businesses, about people who started with nothing and built empires from their laptops. At first, I laughed it off. But something about those stories lit a spark I hadn't felt in years. Dangerous, quiet thought, whispering that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't meant to stay here forever. And that whisper was about to change everything. That whisper didn't go away. It grew louder every day. I clocked in at the factory. The machines roared, the floor smelled like oil and hot metal, and the men around me looked half alive, eyes dulled by routine. I started to wonder if this was what my parents wanted for me, an endless loop of exhaustion while Ethan climbed higher. Jake, the older coworker, noticed the shift in me. One evening, while we were packing up, he said, "You've got more in you than this kid. Ever thought about working for yourself?" I laughed at first. "I don't have the money for that," he smirked, wiping grease from his hands. "You don't need money. You need patience." That night, I sat on my old laptop in my dim room and searched everything I could about online business. E-commerce, dropshipping, digital marketing, words I barely understood but couldn't stop reading about. I'd come home from work, eat whatever leftovers were in the fridge, and study until my eyes burned. I didn't tell my parents. They'd just call it another pipe dream. Then came the call that reignited my resentment. Ethan phoned me one weekend, his voice loud over the noise of some party. "Bro, college life's insane. Once I graduate, maybe I'll hire you to manage my place or something." He laughed, and I forced myself to laugh too. But the second the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the laptop screen. I didn't want to work for Ethan. I wanted to build something that would make him realize I never needed him more of them. From that moment, my free hours became sacred. No TV, no weekends, no distractions. Just me, my laptop, and a dream I couldn't afford to fail. I didn't know it yet. But that quiet rebellion was the first real step toward the life that would one day flip everything upside down, and soon. That secret would no longer stay hidden. For months, I lived a double life. By day, I was the obedient son who worked long hours at the factory. By night, I was the desperate dreamer teaching himself how to run an online store. I'd sit hunched over my laptop until sunrise, my fingers trembling from exhaustion, but my mind alive for the first time in years. The flickering blue light of the screen became my escape, a small, fragile piece of hope I guarded like a secret. But secrets don't stay safe for long in my family. One afternoon, I came home early from a shift and found my mom sitting at the table with my laptop open. My heart dropped. She was scrolling through my business dashboard, her eyes sharp with disapproval. "What is this nonsense?" she demanded. "You've been wasting money on these scams instead of helping your brother." I tried to explain. "Mom, it's not a scam. I've actually made a few sales." She slammed the lid shut. "You need to stop this right now. Ethan's graduation is next month, and we're short on money. Be responsible for once." That word again, responsible. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I ended up giving her half my savings, pretending it didn't break me to watch years of sacrifice vanish in minutes. A week later, I wasn't invited to Ethan's graduation. I found out from photos online, him in his cap and gown, mom crying, dad grinning like he'd raised a king, and me. I was at home, sitting in the dark, listening to the hum of my laptop as a notification pinged. "You've made a sale." It was for $12. But I stared at that message like it was a lifeline. Because for the first time in years, something I built, something mine, had finally worked, and that tiny victory would soon grow into something none of them could ignore. After that $12 sale, something inside me changed. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was proof that I could create something out of nothing. I started doubling down. Every extra shift I picked up at the factory, every hour of sleep I gave up, it all went into that small online store. I'd drag myself home covered in metal dust, shower in silence, and then sit down at my laptop like a man possessed. I moved out not long after. My parents called it a tantrum, saying I was abandoning them now that Ethan was successful. The truth was, I couldn't breathe there anymore. Every inch of that house reminded me of who I was supposed to be, the backup plan, the provider, the forgotten one. I rented a small, cheap apartment with peeling paint and a broken heater. It was quiet, lonely, but for the first time in my life, it was mine. Those first few months were brutal. I lived off instant noodles and dollar coffee while juggling factory shifts and late-night order packing. There were nights I fell asleep at my desk with the glow of the laptop still burning into my eyelids. But slowly, my efforts started to pay off. Orders trickled in, then dozens, then hundreds. One morning, I checked my account and saw my monthly revenue had crossed $10,000. I just sat there staring, tears blurring my screen. Not out of joy but disbelief. No one had helped me. No one had believed in me. Yet here I was, quietly building something real. When Mom called that evening, I didn't mention any of it. She just asked if I could send some money because Ethan's apartment rent went up. I told her I'd try. But for the first time, I didn't mean it. Because I'd finally realized if I kept saving everyone else, I'd never save myself, and I was done being their safety net. A year later, the tables began to turn, but not in the way I expected. I was eating dinner alone one night, answering customer emails, when my phone rang. It was Mom, her voice shaky. "Your brother's going through a rough patch. He lost his job." She said it like it was temporary, like Ethan's brilliance had just been misunderstood. But I could hear something else behind her tone, fear. She explained that Ethan had been laid off after a company merger. His degree, his charm, his potential, none of it mattered anymore. He just needs a place to stay for a while, she pleaded, until he gets back on his feet. I hesitated, but old habits die hard. So I said yes. When Ethan showed up at my apartment, dragging 2 suitcases and a bruised ego, I barely recognized him. Gone was the confident smile and polished clothes. He looked tired, bitter, smaller somehow. "Thanks for letting me crash, man," he said, dropping his stuff by the door. I told him it was fine, though inside, a storm was brewing. Over the next few weeks, I watched him lounge around like it was still college. He'd sleep in late, scroll through his phone, and sneer when he saw me working. "You still doing that online thing?" He'd joke. "Crazy how you've stuck with that little side hustle." I wanted to tell him that my side hustle had grown into a real company, that I had employees now, that my revenue was triple what he ever earned. But I stayed quiet. I wasn't looking for validation anymore. I was watching, learning, seeing how quickly life humbled the golden child. Then one night, I overheard him on the phone, laughing. "Yeah, I'm staying with my loser brother till I figure things out. He's still playing entrepreneur." I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because the best revenge isn't shouting the truth, it's letting success speak for you when they least expect. And Ethan was about to find out just how loud silence. It can be by the time Ethan was sleeping on my couch. My company had exploded beyond anything I could have imagined. I'd hired 2 virtual assistants, a marketing intern, and Jake, my old co-worker from the factory, as my operations partner. We'd gone from selling trinkets to building full product lines, running ads, managing suppliers. Every day felt like a climb, but this time it was one I chose. Ethan, meanwhile, seemed trapped in denial. He'd talk about how the job market is broken, or how his degree was too advanced for small companies. But he never once mentioned gratitude for the roof over his head. Some nights, he'd mock me in passing, "Hey CEO, how's the empire?" He'd laugh, not realizing how close to the truth he was. My business bank account had crossed 6 figures. The first time I saw that number, I just sat there in silence, my heart pounding. I wanted to call someone, to tell them, but there was no one to call. My parents still believed I was wasting my time. They rarely checked in unless it was about Ethan. Then one evening, Mom phoned. Your brother's been applying everywhere. Maybe you could help him get something like an assistant job or delivery work." The irony was suffocating. For years, I'd been the invisible one funding his dreams, and now they wanted me to help him get back on track. I told her I'd think about it, but inside, something shifted. I realized I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. Not approval, not money, not validation. My success didn't need to be announced. It just needed to exist. Still, I couldn't ignore the poetic balance of it, all how the boy who mocked my little online store, I'd soon depend on it to survive. And soon enough, fate would hand me the perfect opportunity to prove it. It happened 6 months later. I was sitting in my office, my own office, when I got another call from Mom. Her voice was trembling this time. It's a kind of fear I'd never heard before. "Ethan's in trouble," she said. "He's behind on rent, his credit cards are maxed out, and his girlfriend left him. He doesn't have anyone else to turn to." For a moment, I almost laughed at the cruel symmetry of it all. The same family that once guilt-tripped me into funding Ethan's success now needed me to rescue him from his failure. "What do you want me to do, Mom?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Just help him, please. You've always been the stable one." There it was again, the stable one. The invisible savior. After a long silence, I said, "Send him to me." Ethan arrived a few days later, shoulders slumped, pride shattered. He didn't bring up the old jokes or the condescending smirk. He couldn't. Life had already humbled him far better than I ever could. Over dinner, he said softly, "I just need a fresh start. I'll take anything." So I gave him something, an entry-level position at my company. Data management, simple tasks, nothing glamorous. But I didn't tell him I was the owner. I used my business partner, Jake, as the public face of operations. Ethan never questioned it. He was too desperate, watching him clock in every day. Unaware that his loser brother was signing his paychecks, stirred something strange in me. It wasn't revenge, it was peace. Every smug comment, every childhood slighted, all lost its weight when I saw him humbled by the same world that once applauded him. But deep down, I knew this quiet satisfaction wouldn't last. Ethan was prideful, and pride has a way of crawling back up when it thinks it's safe. And soon, he'd say something that would shatter the fragile silence between us. It started subtly. Ethan began to regain his confidence. The same cocky tone that used to make my skin crawl crept back into his voice. He'd been at the company for 3 months, doing decent work, earning praise from supervisors who had no idea he was my brother. And with every compliment, his ego grew a little more. One Friday evening, our team gathered for a company dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. I sat quietly at a corner table with Jake, letting my staff enjoy themselves. Ethan showed up late, freshly groomed, his arrogance fully restored. He didn't even glance my way as he mingled with the group, cracking jokes like he owned the room. Halfway through the night, I overheard him laughing with a few of the marketing guys. "You know, it's funny. I used to have this older brother who thought he could run an online store. Poor guy wasted years trying to make it work. Last I heard, he's probably still broke somewhere." The table erupted in awkward laughter. Jake looked at me, eyebrows raised. "You gonna let him talk like that?" he whispered. I took a sip of my drink, my pulse steady, but my chest burning. "Not yet," I said quietly, as the evening went on. Ethan kept running his mouth, oblivious to how everyone around him started falling silent. They all knew who I was, every single one of them except him. He was bragging about his past, about being the smart one in the family, while unknowingly insulting the man who signed his checks. When dessert arrived, Jake leaned over and said, "It's time." I nodded. My heart pounded not out of anger, but out of something colder, calmer. I stood up, walked to the front of the room, and took the microphone. Ethan smirked, like he thought I was about to make a toast. He had no idea I was about to rewrite the story he'd been telling his whole life. And when I opened my mouth, his entire world began to crumble. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch. The room buzzed with tension, forks froze mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Ethan leaned back in his chair, still grinning, that same familiar smirk that used to make me feel small. I started simply, "Most of you already know who I am," I said. my voice calm, steady. But one person here doesn't. I turned toward Ethan. You've been working hard these past few months, and I've been watching. He chuckled nervously. Oh, the mystery boss finally speaks. I smiled. Yeah, the mystery boss. Your brother. The words hit like a hammer. The color drained from his face. He looked around the room, hoping someone would laugh and tell him it was a joke, but no one did. The entire staff sat frozen. Jake leaned back, arms crossed, watching it unfold like the ending to a long overdue movie. I continued, You said once I'd never amount to anything, that I'd always be the responsible one, cleaning up your messes while you chased your dreams. But while you were out there laughing at me, I built this company from scratch. Every late night, every dollar you mock, it's all right here. Ethan stammered. You're the CEO? I nodded. And the guy who gave you a chance when no one else would. My tone wasn't bitter. It was surgical, quiet, precise. I didn't need to humiliate him. The truth was enough. No one applauded. No one cheered. They just watched as the Golden Boy's mask shattered in real time. Ethan mumbled something about needing air and rushed out, face pale, hands shaking. I didn't follow him. I just stood there, letting the weight of years lift off my chest. For once, the silence didn't feel empty, it felt deserved. And in that silence, I realized I'd finally taken back the life they'd stolen from me. Ethan didn't show up to work after that night. No call, no message, just vanished, the way pride does when it has nowhere left to hide. A few days later, Mom called me, furious and trembling. What did you do to your brother? He's devastated. You humiliated him in front of everyone? I took a deep breath before answering. No, Mom. I told the truth. For once, she tried to guilt-trip me the same way she always did. You've changed. You used to be kind, selfless. I still am, I interrupted. But not for people who never saw me as more than a safety net. There was silence on the line, the kind that only comes when the balance of power finally shifts. Then she sighed, muttered something about me being ungrateful, and hung up. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger, just clarity. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I wasn't the backup plan or the provider or the shadow behind someone else's dream. I was me. A man who built something from the ruins of everyone else's expectations. Over the next few months, I expanded the company, hired new staff, and quietly donated to scholarships for kids who had to give up their education like I once did. I never bragged, never posted about it. My success didn't need to scream it, just needed to exist. Sometimes, I still think about Ethan, whether he ever realized what I'd tried to teach him. That talent without humility is a ticking clock. But I don't carry hate anymore. I carry peace. Because in the end, the failure they mocked became the one they couldn't ignore. And when people ask how I did it, I just smile and say, I stopped waiting for them to believe in me because I finally believed in myself. And that belief was worth everything they took from me.